Hello, welcome to 5-Minute Music. So I started playing piano when I was 8 years old. 8 years old? Is that even right? And then when I was about 11, I got really interested in guitar and other string instruments. Then when I was 13, I started playing violin, which is my main instrument. But I never really lost interest in any of the other instruments that I had started, and I gradually became interested in even more instruments, into all sorts of styles of music. I have lots of musical interests. Over the years, I've accumulated a lot that I don't quite need, so these are the most useless musical objects that I own. I first want to preface this video by saying that I'm not here to diss any company that made these products. I also didn't want to try to be too funny and say something like piano duet books, because you know, no one will play with me. I'm first gonna just generalize and say almost any music book that comes with a DVD. Like, we have YouTube now. There was one point when I was learning guitar and I did use DVDs as I was learning, but the ones that I watched just weren't all that great. Also, I didn't want to be too cocky and say anything that has to do with basic music theory, but basically any book that tries to teach me what a G major scale is, I just don't have a use for it. Similarly, these kinds of things. I once actually spent money on a piano chord chart. I was in the shop with my grandma when I was buying it, and she was like, you know, you can just Google that stuff, right? But I really like having physical books to learn from, if you couldn't tell. And so I bought a piano chord chart, which is pretty useless because at the time it was just like, wow, this is C major. Wow, this is D major, and I didn't know what to do with that information. These guitar chord charts are also pretty useless. Some of these chords are like, stretch your hand across 5 frets, break it, and if you do that successfully, you'll be able to play a beautiful F sharp split third chord in an inversion that makes it sound even worse than it usually does. It's just not worth it. I'm gonna say it. Some of these chords just aren't worth it. This is probably the most useless item here because it's the only item that I've never used. So one day I was just sitting on a chair in my room and my mom opens the door and she just looks at me. She throws this on the chair that I'm sitting on. She's like, I thought you might get something out of it. And then she left. Piano for quitters. There's just a man sitting agonized at the piano. And if that wasn't enough, this is a VHS tape. It's just not the most useful item for me. And again, not to hate on any brand here, but the Meisel Chin Chum, I think I had something called a Strad pad that I put over my chin rest. And the reason that we put items like this over our chin rest is because depending on the way that you're holding the violin, you can get a lovely thing here that looks like a hickey. Violin hickey is a real thing. Or you can also get acne here, or I think there's a lymph node somewhere in here, so you can irritate that and then it's just gross all the time. So stuff like this tends to prevent it, but I tried this one with pretty high hopes and it just did not work. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that maybe it didn't fit my particular chin rest, or maybe I didn't read the package right, but it didn't work for me. Next up we have a saxophone reed, and it is a Rico 2. I had to rent a saxophone from a music store, and the saxophone that I rented came with 1 reed, and it's a 2. For those of you who don't know about wind instruments, 2 just basically means that this is a soft reed. I could basically sigh into the instrument and it would make a honking sound. It didn't sound great, but it was the only reed they gave me, so for the month that I was playing the saxophone, this was all I had, so I protected it. But now I have a saxophone reed in my clarinet case. I don't need it. These next two are the same thing. They're these. So I usually help out at a summer music camp, and one of their activities was teaching the young children how to conduct, and the person running that activity gave all the kids these little conducting batons. And at the time, I was signed up for conducting 1 at my college, but the course hadn't started yet. I went over to the person who was giving these out and I was like, do the volunteers get any? I ended up getting 2. So these were my first conducting batons, and I was legitimately planning to just walk into my college classroom like, I'm ready to conduct. But they had specific length requirements on the baton, and this falls a little bit short. I suppose I could have just chopped off part of this and combined them. Could they have stopped me? Would they have stopped me? I probably won't get to conduct the Berlin Phil with these, but I'll still keep them because I have to keep everything. I'm just kidding, and these next 2 items totally aren't proof of that. Various broken bits of rosin. It's broken. I was talking to someone that I hadn't seen in a while and we were both getting ready for orchestra rehearsal, and I was busy like actively listening or something as I was rosining my bow, and sometimes I just drop things, so I just dropped it on the ground. The person I was talking to was just kind of like, oh. Another useless item, any guitar pick that doesn't have a little grippy thing, because as you just heard, I drop things. Before I got picks that had a little grip on them, I would be practicing on my acoustic and then I would just drop it into my guitar. You have no idea how many hours I spent just I actually don't hear it anymore. I think my pick got stuck. That'll be another video, I guess. I'm not dealing with it right now. So yeah, grippy picks. The next two are honorable mentions from Dollar Tree. They're honorable mentions because I do enjoy using them, but no one needs them. The famous $1 guitar. The tuning's not fantastic, and this totally accurate saxophone. I don't need any of these things, but I'm keeping them all. There's a lesson to be learned there. I think the best way to end this video is to play a serenade on my tiny guitar with a non-grippy pick.